Nation investigative producer Allison Weiner. Great to see both of you. Neema, I'll start with you. The defense may want to argue that there is somebody else out there committing these types of crimes. Could this create an alternative theory of the crime and raise reasonable doubt when it comes to Kohberger himself?
And it's possible if the evidence come in, but I don't think the evidence is going to come in, and this is why. The prosecution can introduce evidence of prior bad acts, and we know this is eerily similar for the reasons that you said. A break-in in a college town, in the middle of the night, ski mask, knife, someone who was silent. But that's not something the defense can do. The defense normally can't bring in evidence of other suspects and other crimes. So I expect the judge in this case, and the judge has been very cautious because we know it's a death penalty case and there's mandatory state and federal appeals to keep out all this evidence. So I don't think it's going to come in. I don't think the prosecution wants it to come in because, frankly, it's not helpful for their case if there is indeed another suspect committing similar acts.
And Allison, your insight is crucial here. You've been on the ground in Idaho from the very beginning. You've been looking into this case extensively. You learned of that other break-in. What do you know today?
Well, actually, we already knew about this other break-in and that he had been questioned in relation to that. But the more interesting thing is that there was a burglary in his apartment building while he was already a teacher's aide, already at Washington State University. The burglary occurred in the home of one of his co-employees, somebody else that was working at the Washington State University. And after it happened, she reached out to Brian Kohberger to ask him, because he lived very close by, as did other people that he knew lived in that complex. And she reached out, spoke to him, and he suggested that she put in cameras for security. And the police questioned this woman about what had happened about this burglary in relation to Brian Kohberger. And they also posited that it's possible that he was able to hack into the Wi-Fi and watch her through the cameras that she ultimately installed. And this is reporting that NewsNation has had for a bit. Yeah. We don't know how it's going to figure in, but I could tell you when I went to speak to this woman who had been burglarized, the Washington State Police called me and said to leave her alone, that she'd been through enough for now. And I acquiesced to their demands. But I also found out from source very close to her that to this whole incident, that the police had questioned her extensively, including the FBI.
Allison, let me stick with you for a second. The fact that police called you and asked you to step back a bit, do you think that means you could be testifying in this case?
Well, that's what I took it to mean. I mean, I'm sure that there was a flurry of activity. I was there long after the murders. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was probably like in May of 2023. So, and I've been there many times, but this was a time. And the fact that they were kind of on her speed dial, obviously she'd been having some issues with people approaching her. I went to her apartment, left a note. She still had a Ring camera and was able to see who was there. And then I got the call from the police, and they did, the police can't tell you not to talk to somebody, but I understood that it seemed that it could possibly be interference with the actual case and step back.
Neema, are any other crimes wise, at least, for the defense to bring this up, or do you think this could backfire altogether?
It could backfire, but Allison talked about the potential motive here, and that's really the big question mark. Obviously, the big difference between the previous burglary and this one is Kohberger wasn't even a student at the University of Washington yet, and we know how important the cell site evidence was in this case. Obviously, we saw Kohberger's cell phone travel from Pullman into Idaho, not all the way to Moscow, but I'm sure that's something that the police ruled out. But the question that everyone has is, we know the motive isn't an element of the crime, but the jurors are going to want to know why someone did this. So I think Allison's reporting is spot on, and if that shows some sort of stalking or motivation, I think that would be helpful for the prosecution. But we also know there's a very, very broad gag order in this case. The witnesses, the parties, no one can talk about anything. So that may be the reason law enforcement had that conversation with Allison.
Allison, like you mentioned, you've been there several times. You've talked to people on the ground. With this new information, do you think that could change Kohberger, at least when it comes to the court of public opinion, what so many Americans may think about him currently after this murder, or the quadruple murder?
I mean, the burglary that I was talking about, or the one where he wasn't around and was cleared? I mean, I'm not sure.
Really? Well, really, both of them. And now that the jury is certainly going to hear about this new evidence that's come out, do you think that might change any preconceived notions they may have of this suspect?
No, I think that if they're coming in and they are found to be unbiased and able to reach a verdict during voir dire and that they speak to them, we're hoping that they will be unbiased and reach a conclusion based on the evidence. In terms of the general public, I think most people that you talk to think that he's guilty. I mean, there's a small group of people that love people in prison that we've also reported on.
Yes.
But aside from that small group of people that seem to really enjoy, getting up close personal with somebody who may have killed four young people, most of the country, I would guess, and certainly most of my reporting has shown that everyone thinks he's guilty.
Neama, please.
But we need to be objective.
Of course. And Neama, your thoughts here.
Well, I think there are obviously some people that are not going to believe that Kohberger is guilty. I think really it's going to come down to that single source DNA, right? That puts him at the scene. The defense is going to have to argue that it was somehow transferred. I mean, obviously we know now DNA is pretty well accepted and DNA doesn't lie. I think that's going to be the most damaging evidence for the defense, and I don't see how they can overcome that.
Neama,
well, there is
yes, Allison, please go ahead.
There is an issue about how it was processed and the fact that it went to an independent lab and that the sample wasn't able to be looked at by the Idaho State Police lab. So I imagine that the defense is going to try to do something with that.
Well, I know both of you are following this case very closely, as well as NewsNation. Neama Rahmani, Allison Weiner, always appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.